Hey guys, welcome to the very first live stream event from Shadowsoft. I'm Derek Sutherland, this is John Ray. We're both senior engineers here at Shadowsoft, and today we're going to be talking about a lot of different things that Shadowsoft does, as well as some lab material that we're going to cover for an upcoming event. A little about us, John, do you want to talk a little bit about us first? Who Shadowsoft is, what we do?
So Shadowsoft was founded on the premise of integrating open source software, and since then we have really moved to become a best-in-breed technology company. What we try to do is we want to help you solve problems. We want to help you solve business problems, and we want to use the latest and greatest technology to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And so we've been around for about 9 years now, going on 10 almost. So we've been, building from the ground up on open source and really trying to help others either move to it or at least understand the concept of why it's important. That's where we found our bread and butter, and that's where we're really growing from. Today, though, we're really going to be focusing on DevOps, why not only it's important, but some tools that you can use to help you get started. This is actually a preview for an upcoming event we're going to be hosting on March 23rd, which will include a combination of labs and presentation material. So if you're a technical folk and you're really interested in Ansible, Azure, Conjur, how do I migrate or enable myself to use the cloud at all? Or how do I use configuration management tools? Be sure to check it out. We're also going to have plenty of business level content that's going to cover a whole slew of how do you increase and improve corporate confidence through the use of DevOps. And that's definitely going to be coming on March 23rd. But today, we're specifically going to be talking about Ansible, Azure, and Conjur. For those of you who aren't familiar, Ansible is a configuration management tool that was purchased by Red Hat a few years ago. They've really grown to be one of the easiest to use solutions at one of the fastest rates. They have a very large community in front of them. And Azure is Microsoft's cloud-based platform. They're really responsible now for being a great competitor for AWS, which is going to help squeeze the market and help us get to a better price point, being closer to zero, as we'd like to have it. And last, we're going to be covering Conjur, which for those of you who aren't familiar, it's pretty new to the game, but it's a great secret management platform to keep your keys safe and secure while storing your code in reversion control or whatever it is you want to do. With that, we're going to start on some labs. First, we're going to show you a little bit of Ansible with Azure and show you how you can enable yourself to use it pretty smoothly and easily. We're going to dig into a little bit of lab content. First, I'm going to familiar you guys a little bit with the Azure Working Portal. For those of you who aren't familiar with Azure or with AWS, Azure is a cloud-based platform. We're talking about infrastructure as a service. So from the looks of what we're talking about scalable infrastructure, the ability to spin up VMs inside of a online-based platform, and then being able to do things like software-defined networking, software-defined storage, and things of the like. This is Microsoft's solution, as I said before, and so many people frequently are familiar with cloud, they're familiar with virtualization, but they don't really know how to get started and what are the tools that are out there they can use to start enabling themselves. So with that, we're going to start with Ansible. Ansible is an automation tool, as we talked about before, written in Python, and it allows us to be able to quickly and easily write really small bits of, I wouldn't even say code, but key value files for being able to either spin up or configure different boxes. It comes pre-configured with some plugins for Azure, which is what we're going to be using today. And so we're going to start first by looking at what we can actually create really easily. So I'm going to bring up my example file here, and you'll see in front of you that we have a bunch of different code. And I really shouldn't say code, it really is more like key value pairs. This is strictly written in YAML, which is a language transferable file format that works for a lot of different things. In fact, it even works with our Conjur platform we're going to be using later today. So in front of us, we have a series of different values that are marked as variables that we're going to be using throughout launching an instance. And then it's as simple as calling the command to start up an Azure-based virtual machine, and then specifying the different information that's associated with it. So names, resource groups, usernames, passwords, how big the VM should be, and then any specific tags you want to go along with it, as well as any open ports you want to associate with it. So for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to be creating a VM that is a standard DS1 size, which is, for all intents and purposes, it's a 2-core, 3 gig of RAM box inside of Azure. It's just a nomenclature that they happen to use. We're going to be using CentOS for the operating system, specifically 7.2. And so you'll see that listed here in the contents that we have in front of us. Before we can do that, though, we need to create ourselves an SSH key so that way we can use that with the box. Luckily, I've already gone ahead and done that, so I'm just going to cat my public key real quick. We're going to look at root.ssh id rsa.pub. I'm going to copy this content. And now we're going to place that inside of our SSH key contents. And the reason why we need that here is because that's going to be used when the box is provisioned, so that way we can connect back up and see what the box is actually doing and be able to perform actions on it. The group name here is just a variable that I declared. It's just a unique name we're going to have to group our different resources. So in this case, I'm just going to come up with a random name. Let's just call it Hello World. And I'll just throw a 1, 2, 3 in front of it. Now, after we've created and configured our Ansible file, all we have to do is run Ansible playbook against it. And that's going to run the playbook. Now, before this had to go, you're going to probably ask yourself, well, how does it know to talk to my Azure account? How does it know what resources I can spin up, things like that? Prior to this environment being set up, I had pre-told my environment what access token keys to use, what tenant it should be inside of, and what subscription to base the charging of that off of. So for your cases, if you're ever using Ansible, those are things you'll have to set up prior. So I'm going to run this. This is going to take probably about a minute or two for it to create that same instance inside of Azure. Now, as you may be wondering, it looks like right now I'm stuffing any sensitive data, including the public keys, inside of that Ansible config file. And that's not really going to be helpful for us when it comes to cybersecurity risk. We don't want our SSH public keys, or even especially our private keys, or any security information out there in the wild. Later on inside this demo, as I kind of hinted at earlier, we're going to be using Conjur to remotely place those variables inside of our Ansible playbooks. That way we're not going to be keeping them inside of our source control or anything of the likes. It looks like we're going to have another minute or so until this is up. So in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll introduce you guys a little bit to the Conjur dashboard. So Conjur, as I said before, is our secret management platform. And Conjur allows us to be able to quickly and easily manage different secrets inside of your environments. This could be SSH keys, it can be environment variables that you don't want to have to store inside of something like Etsy profile. It can be different tokens you use throughout your environment. And then you can grant API keys to different individual boxes to say which machines have access to which values. And that's how we actually use it inside of our environment. So inside of the Conjur dashboard, we get a list of the users that currently exist, the groups, and then you'll see layers and hosts. Layers, and for all purposes for this instance, what we're really talking about is groupings of hosts. It's just a way of doing role-based access controls for different machine types. We have 2 of them that currently exist. We call them pub keys. We have 14 different host machines that have been created. We created throughout previous labs. Specifically, the one we'll be using today is Ansible. That's the one I've used to create different permissions. And what we're looking at really for what we're going to be using in this demo is secrets. Now, we have a bunch of different secrets that come out of the box as part of like a demo example, but the ones we'll be using inside of our environment include our Azure tenant, our Azure subscription ID, Azure client ID, Azure secret, and SSH key. Those are the things we'll be rotating out eventually throughout the labs. So bear that in mind while we're building these boxes, that eventually those will no longer be inside of our Ansible playbooks. Let's take a look and see where we're at so far. Looks like we're still building that box. So do we have any questions coming in so far? Is everybody pretty confident on? Okay.
Apparently you're answering everybody's questions.
Apparently. If you have any questions, please, at Shadowsoft News or in the live feed. Okay, so Let's see if we can actually see the VM being spun up. So to introduce you a little bit to the Microsoft Azure platform, if you're familiar with virtualization providers, this is pretty similar. You have your virtual machines listed, virtual networks, load balancers, things like that. And the way Azure groups different machines together is using what's called resource groups. The resource group we're using in regards to this machine in particular is labeled CCSP. So I'm going to dig under there. And we'll see all the machines that I previously created. In fact, we see the new machine that I created just now, a network interface, a network security group, and a public IP address. If I look at that virtual machine, let's just see. It appears that it's running, so it must be just finishing up. And in fact, it was. So now we can actually go look and see, hey, can we SSH into this box? And if so, what's that going to look like? So there's a couple of things we can do. I could use Ansible to get the public IP address again, or I can go into my Azure portal, and I see the public IP address is listed right there. So I'm going to grab that. And I will SSH into the box. Yes. And we successfully connected. So that created the box really quickly and easily. Now, if I want to be able to list the different machines inside of my environment, I can actually do that using an Ansible inventory file. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to run Ansible I inventory, and specifically the inventory we're using is host 2. And I guess really before I run this, what I should show you is what Ansible inventories are and how they work. So if I go into Ansible and I go under inventory, we have two different inventory files, hosts and host 2. The first one is pretty similar to an Etsy host file if you guys are familiar. And so what we're looking at is a list of IP addresses or host names that the box recognizes, and then you can group them with these brackets. So in this case, we have a local host group and we have an Apache web group. The only machine that exists is localhost under localhost. So this is pretty an empty file, but you could add other IP addresses and known domain names really easily. The other inventory files where things get a little bit interesting. We're working with what's called dynamic inventories inside of Ansible. And what a dynamic inventory essentially is a Python file that reaches out to some outside provider to pull up some information like IP addresses, host names, and things of that nature, so we can make Ansible actions without having to constantly change some local file, knowing where the IP addresses and things like that are. So in this case, we used a Python file that came from the Ansible resource for Azure specifically. It does require those predefined access keys I told you about before, the Azure tenant, ID, subscription, and whatnot. So those need to be set as either environment variables or into a configuration file. But as I said, I previously set that up. So at this point, I can run my Ansible command. We're going to do Ansible -I inventory host 2. And we want to list everything that's tagged with the group name. We said hello world 1, 2, 3. And this should give us a list back of IP addresses of anything that's been created with that group name, which we see that's our box that we created previously. So it's pretty cool how you can be able to quickly and dynamically grab access to all those things really easily. So with that, we're going to quickly move on to the second lab. We're going to actually work on configuring a box and watching those changes happen in real time. So what I'm going to do first is go back. I've actually grouped this all out into a couple different lab folders to make it real nice and easy for our future labs that are going to be coming up in March. So we have a bunch of different files that are listed in here. We have our Ansible config. We have our playbook that we're going to be using, the inventory files we made previously, and we have a directory called roles, which a role in Ansible is essentially a way of combining different configurations to represent the role of a given machine. So if your machine is running WordPress or if it's running a Node.js server, you would probably make a role that represents that server type at least. In this case, we made a role called app, which we'll go into there first. And inside of here, we have a couple of different directories. Let me just ls actually. The files and directories we're going to be particularly working with in this example are tasks and files. So our task directory are going to include all the configuration changes we're making to a given box. Our files directory is going to include all of the files that we're going to be copying from our local Ansible machine onto our individual environment. So in this case, we're going to look at our tasks that we have listed in here. And this is really the first introduction we're going to have to tasks in Ansible outside of our Azure VM creation. So inside of Ansible, there is a bunch of different modules that you can run as tasks, and all of these modules are publicly posted and available. There's two different ways you can go get them. You can either go to Ansible's website and go to their module section. There's an index of all publicly available ones that they provide, from different cloud providers to different file management systems to network systems, things like that. And we can also look at a host of a bunch of other ones that people have made that are publicly available. And we do that at Ansible Galaxy. This is pretty much a repository of all roles and resources that anyone has created in regards to Ansible. So if you're interested in something you can't find out there on their public website, you can go here, and there's literally hundreds of thousands of modules that are out there. Today we're going to be using the Yum module because we're working with a CentOS-based box, so we're going to be using Yum to install some packages. We'll be using user and group to be able to install some random users, the file and copy module, as well as some others. So we're not going to get really inundated with the nuances of each of these individual modules, as that'll take really too long and I think take away from the actual lab itself. But pretty much what we're going to be working with here is a Node.js-based application. It just hosts a website that posts a bunch of different DevOps tools that you can then edit and make some changes to. There'll be more modifications we'll obviously do in the labs on March 23rd, but for now we're just going to kind of briefly walk through some things. So in regards to this lab, we're looking at running Yum for a number of different packages. We're going to be installing Git and GCC and C++. That allows us to run Node.js and compile any modules that go along with it. We're then going to create a Node user and a Node group. Those are going to be responsible for managing the access rights to the Node.js file and services that are running on the box. And then we're going to copy a series of folders and files onto that box that contain all of our configurations associated with our given application. With that, we're going to be sourcing the NPM, which is the Node.js package management tool, to install any Node-based dependencies. And then we're going to install the Node app as an actual CentOS-based service on the box. With that, we'll quickly and easily be able to turn the service on and off as if it were any other service. So with that really quickly, I'm going to bring us back to our front directory where we have our Ansible-based Azure config files. So let's go take a look at one of these guys. And this one's a lot smaller than the last one. And the reason for that here is we're not working with a ton of variables inside of this. We're pretty much working with just the task that we've built inside of that app. And we're referencing it by this role we have labeled here called app, as we specified before. The user that we're looking at is normal user. That's the user we use to SSH into the box. And this become flag that we have here tells that Ansible that it's allowed to become root when installing some packages. With that, I got to change this host group since we're working with a different machine than I was previously. We're looking at hello world 123 again. We're going to run our Ansible playbook. And just like before, this is pretty much all there is to it. Now, when you run this, it's going to take a number of minutes when you're configuring this, especially for the first go around. It's going to connect to that box via SSH. If it's a Windows box, then it'll use, if Paramiko is available, to use that, or we'll end up using PowerShell as well if that's available. But in cases of Linux-based environments like we're dealing with now, it'll use regular SSH, and then it'll commit each action one at a time. Now, Ansible is smart enough that depending on the modules you're using, it won't redo work that it's already done previously. However, if you're using something like the command module or the shell module, you got to make sure you put particular flags in place to check that any files or folders that have been changed or modified are marked so that it doesn't commit an action more than once if you run this playbook again. This is going to take a few minutes, so I'm going to turn to John and ask him, do we have any questions thus far?
Not yet. We're still powering through the slow mode in chat. We did get that fixed. So
Um,
please feel free to tweet at Shadowsoft News.
yeah,
Throw
please.
something in the chat. I'm monitoring it, and I will poke Derek repeatedly until he answers your questions.
Yeah, so please do that. In the meantime, I guess we can talk a little bit about Ansible and the differences between it and normal configuration management tools.
You got a question?
Oh, we have a question, so I can do that first.
So I have a question from William. How capable is the Ansible configuring Windows systems? So,
Right.
talk to me about Windows configuration in Ansible.
Right. So if you're using Ansible, there's two different aspects of Ansible, obviously. There's the client and the server. If you're going to be running Ansible from the server side aspect of it, which really the server side, it's loosely defined server because you can even run this on your laptop like I have been most of the time on mine.
Right, they refer to it as a control machine, right?
Yeah, it's a
not
control
really
machine.
even a server.
Right, exactly. If you're talking about the control machine and running Ansible there, you can do it. It requires Python 2.6 or 2.7. Typically, though, we recommend people run it on Linux just because we're Linux shops and we like Linux. When it comes to your client, it is fully compatible with PowerShell. They've made a lot of strength and a lot of strides in trying to make it super compatible and included with that, which is part of the reason why we're having this discussion about using this with Azure. A lot of our Azure clients are Windows-based clients, although Linux is quickly growing in that market too. But in regards to making changes, there are modules that are pre-built specifically for that. I can actually point to some of them if you're interested. So let's just look at real quick Ansible modules, Windows. There's quite a few now, and especially if you're using something like Chocolatey, which if you're not familiar with Chocolatey, it's essentially a package management tool for Windows. With the usage of that kind of a tool, you can even get your Yum or apt-get type features from a Debian type way of looking at it on a Windows-based file system. So you get that same type of package management. But as you can see, there's a ton of different Windows modules they've built. It works really well. As for what versions of Windows it's compatible with, I've seen anything up from Windows 7, but I'm sure it could also work with Windows XP if there's the right packages pre-installed, or Windows Vista as well. But don't quote me on that because I don't have proof. Any other questions from the...
Well, unfortunately, you said it live, so...
Oh no, I'm quoted forever. Dang it! I'm sorry.
We're gonna snippet this and play it back to you at the next conference we see you at.
No! Any other questions?
Not yet.
All right, well, let's check on our Ansible playbook. It's still running right now. Looks like we've done a couple of steps so far. But to go back to what I was mentioning before, Ansible is a little bit different than most configuration management tools, if you're familiar. If you've been used to using Puppet or Chef or Salt even, most of these tools are they're pull-based. So you typically have a server that's acting as the mechanism for storing all of your different configuration files. They're meant for mapping out your boxes. And then your clients have an agent installed on them, which periodically check in with the master and pull down any changes they need to make. Ansible is completely the opposite of that. In this world, instead of having an agent on each client, Ansible pushes its changes out to its client nodes, and it does it again via SSH, Paramico if SSH isn't available, or PowerShell in the case of Windows. So with that, you have somewhat more control in certain scenarios because at any point in time, if you want to make a change, you can push it immediately rather than waiting for a window of time to show up. So there's some unique cases where you're going to want to definitely use Ansible, and we've even seen it used in the situation of using it in conjunction with other configuration management tools. So there's a lot of different use cases, and we're seeing a lot of people do it today. Any other questions from the Twitter feed or from...
Not right now. I swear I will poke you when there is one.
Okay. Well, I will wait to be poked while we continue to install these files. We're almost complete, it looks like. I wish we had some other feed to turn to so I don't feel off. Sorry, guys. This is really our first live stream, so trying to make do with the situation as we wait for these boxes to complete installing. It is our first rodeo. I will tell you this, for the purposes of this demo, we are not going to be showing Ansible Tower off today. I can log into a box and show you the GUI, But we're really preparing that for our big lab, again, that we're going to be having on March 23rd, if I haven't said that enough already. So if you're free and in the Atlanta area and you're wanting to sign up, we're going to be going through a more in-depth version of these labs, and we will be showcasing the full capabilities of Ansible Tower as well in that situation. So please sign up. We'll have a sign-up page at, do we have a sign-up page?
Shout-out page at the website at
We do.
shadowsoft.com/ I'll tell you what it is.
And I'll throw it on the page. Unless, do you have the camera on both of us or just on me right now? Both of us? Okay, go.
Oh no. On both of us? I'm not really supposed to be here. Getting close.
Can you send? Oh, actually, I can pull it up on my laptop. That's what I should have done. Then we can
Right,
flick it
that's
back
what I was-
over. Yeah,
when you looked at me,
totally right. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. Again, first rodeo, right? Hey, DevOps Roadshow. Let's see what we got. This one. That's the one from last year. Where's the one from this year? Do 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 do. Commit. Here we go. Do you have it on my screen? Okay. Sorry, we're also trying to get used to the whole transitioning thing. So if you guys go to shadowsoft.com/event/DevOps Road to Confidence Tour, there is a sign-up page for you to be able to sign up if you're in the area and would like to join us. We're going to be doing it at Microsoft's Corporate Center right down the road in Alpharetta. There's going to be happy hour afterwards, so food and drinks are going to be included, so come get your booze on. Just kidding, but not really. Let's check on the box in the meantime. Ah, good, it's done. Cool. So now that the box is finished being built, we should have the service up and running. So I'm going to copy that IP address. And let's go to our URL. And our web page is up and running. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, this is DevOps Bookmarks. There's a whole website that this is based off of. They have kindly released their code public open source for us to play with and use. So, yes.
Someone like you to compare Ansible to Windows DSC.
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know anything about Windows DSC. I apologize in advance. But
so
we will take that question and we will get back to you.
So Microsoft's DSC,
or John will answer it.
Well, I'm going to attempt to answer it. So I have a small amount of familiarity with DSC, mostly as it relates to Chef. So Chef fully supports using DSC. And so when you look at something like Ansible versus Windows DSC, the question is not, does Ansible support all the things that DSC supports? Because for the most part, it does. The question is does Windows DSC support your Linux nodes and your Solaris nodes and your other nodes? And the question is the answer is no, it doesn't. But Ansible does. So when you're looking at a tool like Ansible, your real question is do you have a heterogeneous environment or not?
Right. Yeah, I wish I had more information that I could provide. If we take your email down, I would love to look into that for you and get back to you with more information as well. We can reference our Microsoft resources to help provide some context there, as well as our Red Hat resources as well. Switching back to my screen, we're looking at DevOps Bookmarks. This is just the app that we've pre-built and brought into the environment, but we're not taking any kind of glory away from the guys who built this. They have a really great project on GitHub. They've published this open source and it's OpenGPL, so anyone can use it. The cool thing is they kind of give an outline of all the different tools that are out there, and from free to fully supported based products. They give brief descriptions as well as what platforms they work up on, and quick links to be able to access those tools on different websites. It's a pretty neat system. We'll do some neat little labs around it come March 23rd as well for different configuration changes you can make to this really easily. For the purposes of this demo, if I wanted to make a change to this environment, let's go back onto my box. And as I said, because we're using modules that are pretty intelligently designed here, we're not going to have to rerun all of those scripts. It's only going to have to copy one directory, which may take about a minute to rerun again. So what we're going to look at here is the files inside of our roles directory. So we're going to look at the files directory specifically, and there's a directory in here named data. And our data, excuse me. Our data directory includes all of the JSON template files that are associated with this platform that the guys from DevOps Bookmarks made. If we want to make a change to a tool or something, like first let's go look at an actual tool we want to make a change to. Let's look at our cloud platforms or provisioning tools. Yeah, Ansible's in here. So we're going to make a change to this Ansible tool to write that Ansible's the greatest tool in the world. So let's go to Tools. I think Ansible's underneath there. Yes. It's pretty cleanly written JSON, so we can make a quick change to this to just say, you know, the best tool ever. Make a quick change there. I'll go back to that main directory. And we're going to rerun our Ansible script. And as I said, it's not going to, you'll see, look at all the different steps that we ran before. It'll brief over them, but it'll say okay, because it's already made those changes previously. There's some instances where it'll say change, and that's just based on the return code. Where it will pause is when it pauses on the data entry, which is what it's doing right now. It's pausing on that data entry because it has to recopy all the files from that data directory. Could you make it more efficient and copy the files individually instead of the entire data directory? Sure. For the purposes of this demo, though, I tried to keep it real simple and smooth, so we're copying that whole data directory over again, which again will take probably 1 to 2 minutes to do. And these changes should be made in mostly real time. Okay, so with that, if we want to look at the next labs, we're going to look at snapshotting with Azure. So for those of you who are familiar with Azure, they've been making a lot of strides in trying to improve their product and trying to really polish out different features and whatnot. For a long time, they had their old portal, which was manage.windowsazure.com. Their new portal is portal.azure.com. And they've made a lot of changes to make it more of a tile-based system, to make it kind of operate like the Windows platform or even Windows Server 2012 or 2016 if you guys are familiar. And if you want to make a snapshot, there's multiple ways to do it. You can use the new portal platform. I believe they just added the feature of snapshotting it through this GUI. If you would like to do it through a different platform, you can also use what's really cool is their resources.azure.com, which essentially takes all of the REST API controls you can get from Azure and puts them into a nice graphical framework. That way you can see what's being provisioned, what's being changed and done. So if I go to look for the resource, we're going to look at Hello World again, 1, 2, 3. We'll see that virtual machine is listed under here. And I can call a GET request on that machine and then get all kinds of information about it, from the VM size to the name of the hard disk that's underneath it and everything in between. In regards to making changes to the machine, if I go to Actions, we can see all the different generic actions that are associated with it. So you can quickly and easily capture, deallocate the machine, generalize it, and whatnot. And they've even gone through the trouble of making it nice and easy to convert these to PowerShell commands for those of you guys who are Windows shops. So this is a really great resource. It is in preview, but it's fully available to the public. I highly recommend, if you're already an Azure user, that you take a look at it, because there's a lot of cool features you get inside of this platform. In regards to what we're going to do here, we have made a Python module for Ansible that leverages the Azure SDK for taking a snapshot and then spinning us up a new instance inside of Azure. Let's see if that previous Ansible script finished. Looks like it did. So I'm going to go on to the box real quick. And let's see if it made those changes. It may have to restart the service because I don't know if I put that in there. Yeah, I don't think I put that in my Ansible script. So let's do that first. Normal user at 40. Systemctl stop. Node app, I think is what it is. Oh, whoopsie. let's take a look at that again. Well, let's make sure that the change actually got pushed first. Maybe my service isn't restarting appropriately. So let's go first to our data directory where everything gets put. We're going to go under data in here, tools, and we VI our Ansible file. Well, it looks like the change didn't permit. Did I save it? Let's go back and take a look again. Okay, exit one more time. Scroll up. It appears... Oh, I know why. Silly me, I forgot to change this back. Before, when I was practicing this demo, I made some changes to our tasks. So that way I wasn't pushing changes constantly. So let me go into our task directory. And now that I'm back in our app, yep. So this flag force no says essentially if the data in this side of this directory already exists, skip this step. I put that in there before when I was building this because I didn't want to constantly, anytime I reran this, waste more time for myself. So looks like I'll have to run that change again in order to make that persistent change. So yeah, we'll wait for that change to go through. I apologize for the inconvenience of me forgetting to switch that back. That's my bad. In fact, I will make that change permanent right now so I don't have that problem again later. Let's go to GitHub. And for all you guys that are interested, all the content from the roadshow that we're using is actually hosted on GitHub. We're going to be, again, updating this and adding more content to it over the next couple of weeks while we build out the full vet of the lab for March 23rd. But for right now, I'm just going to go in and fix that change real quick while that box is going. So let's go to tasks, main, I'll hit edit. And there it is. We'll remove that. Removed. Force no from data copy task. Yay, so now that's persisted. We're good there. So we'll give that another minute or so to copy over. I'm guessing no new questions yet, since you haven't poked me,
yeah.
as you put it.
I told you I would poke you.
Okay. All right, well, in the meantime, what I will go over with you guys is our ARM template. So when you go to spin up a machine instance that you captured inside of Azure, you're going to want to use what's called an Azure Resource Management template. In fact, Azure in its entirety, whenever you create a machine in Azure, is using an ARM template. Just most of the times behind the scene, you're not really aware of that. So if you go to the Azure portal and you were to be creating a new VM, for example, let's just say, for example, I wanted to spin up a new CentOS box. Excuse me, I typed that in the wrong field. We should be able
in the Azure portal right now.
Yeah. When you hit create, what this is going to do is behind the scenes of all of this, it's actually filling in what's called an ARM template. What's an ARM template? An ARM template essentially is...
Tattoo.
Yes, it's a tattoo. Now, it's a JSON file.
It's an ARM template right
Wow.
here. Your arm should look like this.
It should look like this.
If they don't, you're using the wrong template.
I feel awkward. So we're going to look at an actual ARM template and then show you how it compares to this. So let's just say I was creating this
Before
box.
we get into an ARM template, I just want to remind everybody that this is the first kind of technical meetup that we're doing in conjunction with the Nash DevOps group. And, Nash DevOps is a Nashville-based DevOps meetup, and they are really exploding, growing very large. And so if you're interested in Nash DevOps, you can hit the Nash DevOps meetup. Steve Stewart from Shadowsoft actually helps out a lot with that, so you can reach out to him as well.
Thank you, John. You're right. We should definitely commend you guys. You guys have been really awesome, and the rate at which you guys are growing is, quite frankly, amazing. we've tried to start a lot of different user groups, but Steve has done an impeccable job at helping this group really flourish and grow, and it's been really amazing to just be even privy to seeing it happen. So now, as I'm going through this process of selecting, the username and password and the VM size and whatnot, when you get to the end, you can see it says download template and parameters. That's because all these steps you went through are actually associated with an ARM template. So an ARM template essentially is a JSON file that parameterizes what variables are changeable. So usernames, passwords, VM size, things like that would be considered a parameter. And then it includes JSON that represents the different resources you want to have created inside of Azure's Resource Manager. So we're looking at things like virtual machines, virtual networks. We're looking at storage accounts, things like that. In regards to what we're doing for our instance, we've already built an ARM template that you're going to be using throughout the labs, and we've built an ARM template they'll be leveraging today. So let's go back to our roadshow page, since it's listed there. I believe in lab 5. No, it's lab 6 maybe. Yes. Okay. In here we built an ARM template that pretty much requires a VM name, a username, and a password for the box, and the URL of the machine you took a snapshot of. We'll show you how you can get that URL after you're done capturing the snapshot in just a second. But after you've filled that information in, it goes through the process of creating a virtual network with a certain IP address space the box will be associated with. It creates a public IP address so the box can be accessible, a network interface for private and public management, and then the virtual machine itself, which is a Linux-based box that's a standard size of DS1. Again, you can make any of these things changeable, though, inside your ARM template. For this ARM template, we didn't do that, though. So this is pretty much what we're going to be leveraging. There'll be very little changes, if any, you'll have to make during the labs on the 23rd, though. So it looks like we've finished here with our changes. Let's double check to make sure the changes actually went through this time before I check the page. So we'll go to, now that I'm back on the box, let's sudo su. Let's take a look at our data directory, which has another data directory, tools, and Ansible. VI that. Maybe .json. Yeah, and so now you can see it says inside of here, the best tool ever. Let's go back to our developed bookmarks and see if the changes are there.
Please tell me you spelled it E-V-A-R.
Yeah, I did.
Evar?
Evar. No, I didn't, sadly. It doesn't look like it changed online, so I must have not put in the reset mechanism. Again, the demo gods are not with me today. So I will start and stop our Node.js app real quick, and that should make the changes rather quickly. Because Node.js is a beast when it comes to speed. Yep, and there it is, the best tool ever. So that's another update I'll have to make to the example stuff we use for the labs on the 23rd. But for now, you guys can see the changes actually occurring. Let's go back, though, to our Ansible box. We're going to go to our next lab. And the first thing we're going to do is snapshot this instance. So to snapshot this instance, the first thing I'm going to have to do is look at the ARM template itself, okay? Which we've already taken a look at. So what you'll notice about it, though, is, and as I was saying before, at least alluding to, is you're going to need a VHD URL. Whenever you capture a machine, it creates a VHD that has all the contents of that box inside of Azure in your storage account. Luckily for us, Ansible, when you go to create a capture, will print out that value for us, so then we can feed it back into our next step and ultimately create our machine from that. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to look at my Ansible file we have here. We're looking for first our group name. Oopsie. Which in this case is going to be Hello World. 1, 2, 3. We're going to be, and I will show you a couple different files that we have in here. We're going to remove some old usernames. We're going to run a deprovision agent on that box. And then we're going to capture a snapshot of that box. So quickly, what I'm going to do first is, you'll notice that also before I even do this, that instead of keeping the variables in here anymore, I've now included the variables through an outside resource file. You can do that so you can have multiple variables, and there's multiple ways to even do that as well. But what I'm going to do first is look at our variables file. We're going to keep this the same. The username is still going to be CentOS that we're removing because that's a default user on that box. The group we're going to change again to be Hello World 123. We'll leave the resource group as CCSP, and the user it's going to SSH in as is normal user. So we'll back up there. And the reason why we've set those variables is because despite, let me pull this back up, despite us not listing the usage of those variables anywhere in here, these tasks that we've included in this subtask directory are looking at variables. And this goes back to how do you cleanly set up your playbooks, your roles, your tasks, and things like that. Most people, what they tend to do is they make their tasks inside of their playbooks specifically only point to roles, typically, with the exception of a couple of tasks like VM creation and things like that. When it comes to the task...
Why are those special?
What?
Why is VM creation? Why is that special?
Well, because typically a task is associated with a certain app or a role, as I should say, like if you're saying WordPress instance or whatnot, is something that's separate from the creation of a VM or the snapshot of a VM. Those two types of tasks or destruction of a VM is typically separated from the individual option of something you would stuff in a role. And so typically what ends up happening is most people put tasks that aren't associated with a role inside of the playbook itself or within a task that's outside of a role. And they'll put all the roles that are associated with a given box inside of the playbook as well. So for here, what we're going to be looking at is we've already configured the box. We don't need to do anything with it. We just need to decommission the box, take a snapshot of it, and shut it down. So we're going to be looking at a task where we remove the user, which is going to leverage the variables we have here. A task where we deprovision the box. And then we're going to look at capturing and destroying the instance, which again, leverage variables held inside of this file. In case you guys are interested, we can go look at the tasks directory real quick and go look at those files. So let's look at destroy instance. It's pretty much just an Azure module. It's looking for the name of the virtual machine that currently exists and the resource group that it exists in. And you can control whether you want it to just delete the VM or if you want it to delete the things that are associated with it, such as the storage, the network interfaces and stuff like that. So for us, we're going to destroy everything in regards to it. So that's the reason why those are included. We're in the regards to deprovision agent. It's just running a Microsoft Azure agent-based command on the box to remove the SSH user and its SSH keys. This way, when you go to spin up a new instance of it, you don't have old SSH keys living on the box and things like that. It does some other things too in regards to configuration, but it's a nice little feature because it allows you to clean up the box rather quickly. And the last one we'll be looking at is the capture task one, which the capture instance, Azure Image Capture, this isn't a plugin that currently exists on Ansible Galaxy today. We will probably upload our version in the next couple of weeks after we've done some, checks on it to make sure that it works and performs well in different situations. But essentially, we leverage the Python Azure SDK to build out this module. Now, the way you do that is we have a library directory that you can see here. Inside of that library, we have our module that's strictly named after this Python file we have here. Ansible will straight up read Python and use it as if it was Python itself. So I'll open this up real quick so you guys take a look at it. Essentially, we leverage the Ansible SDK. We give some options for different things you can type in, like resource group name, VM name, and whatnot. But this allows you to quickly generalize the host and then take a snapshot of it and print out at the end the VHD URL. So let's go through the process of actually doing that. Back up real quick. We're going to make sure that all this is still good. Yes, we're good. Ansible playbook, Azure snapshot. So like usual, this is going to take a minute or so to run. Typically when I deprovision the agent, and that's exactly what happened here, once you deprovision the agent, the SSH credentials typically cut out. So let me go change that real quick. I will take away these tasks for now. And we'll just capture it now that it finished that last step. So essentially, as I alluded to before, when you run WA agent deprovision, it removes the SSH user, and Ansible relies on SSH. So when I run that, it sometimes kills the Ansible connection, which is what happened in that last step. So I removed the task now that it finished, and now we're just going to do the capturing portion. This typically goes pretty fast. The longest portion about capturing the boxes, we got to deprovision the box first. So that means we got to fully shut it down and deallocate it from Ansible as a resource. This means when you say deallocate, you're not being charged for it. So we're deallocating the box, removing the connections to the VNet and the network adapters, and then we're taking a snapshot of that instance. So this will probably take upwards from anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes. Sometimes it can take 4, but it's typically not that long. Once it actually shuts down, though, it pretty much happens instantaneously. It's just the shutdown process takes time. We can actually see this occurring, though, if we go into our box. You'll see actually it says now it's deallocating. So that's pretty much the process that takes a while, is physically turning the box off. Sadly, I can't just unplug the cable out of the back of it to make it go faster. Do we have any more questions? Not yet. Well, as we said earlier, we're having a roadshow on March 23rd in Alpharetta at the Microsoft Conference Center. Be there. You know you want to be. There's going to be free drinks. And we all know how much you like to drink, because I like to drink, so to say.
Water only.
Yeah, only water, though. Only water. Okay, so what can we do while we wait for that? Well, we can answer questions if any questions come through. We've talked about Conjur. We've talked about Ansible and some of the differences there. We've talked about Shadowsoft. Talked about Azure.
So Conjur,
Yes.
secrets management.
Yes.
What is secrets management?
Ah,
Why is this a thing?
okay. Yeah, so some people don't really realize kind of the burden that they're facing and the problems they have. So when you're dealing with, especially if you're in a big coding shop, when you're dealing with lots and lots of interworkable code, especially in the configuration management practice or any area we have automation, frequently you keep your passwords with your code, which, as we all know, or we should know, it's not too safe to do that. And so what ends up frequently happening in a lot of organizations, and this has been the downfall of many big name companies and why they've been kind of ousted for how much damage they've done to themselves financially, they've had someone slip up and accidentally commit, keys to a SSH to an administrator box that should be locked down, or just keys in general, to a public-facing Git repository or Subversion repository. Some people leave passwords on random boxes with zero liability and zero control over who has access to that machine. And the problem with that is when you don't have any kind of constraints around where your keys are inside of your organization, you don't really know when you're vulnerable and when you're not. And more importantly than that, someone could have already stolen your information.
Yeah. But like, what happens with a developer? I'm a developer. I want to go fast. I want to do things quickly. I don't want to wait on these large secrets management tools to issue me keys and stuff. How does Conjur really kind of help me with that?
Right. So the cool thing about this is once you set up your environment with Conjur, which actually is pretty fast. For those of you who are unaware, Conjur can be deployed in a Docker container really, really quickly. And it can be configured in less than an hour, honestly. After you get the box up and running, they take care of managing the security aspect for you. They provide a really cool tool called Summon, which is a command line interface for stuffing different secret entries into things like environment variables or other system accessible systems. Like it has a plugin that's already built for Puppet, or for Ansible. So you can strictly just pull information right out of Conjur without having to know really how it works, because essentially all you do is call, and we'll go through this in a minute, but summon the process you want to run, and then fill in environment variables, and then do the rest for you.
So does Conjur work really well with cloud stuff? Like, can I use Conjur with my Azure boxes? Can Azure nodes spin up and pull things down?
Yeah, definitely. Conjur can work well in pretty much any environment. There's no limitation as to where you want to put it. You can pretty much run it anywhere Docker goes, and Docker goes everywhere at this point, unless it's a an older Windows environment. Now that Docker is going onto Windows machines, which yay for Microsoft. With that though, so what ends up happening is you can deploy it pretty much anywhere instantaneously, and as long as your client machines, which need to access the secrets themselves, can through the network touch your Conjur master, they can sync up and pull those secrets whenever they want. So it doesn't matter if it's in the cloud or if it's on premise. However you want to store your secrets, as long as your Conjur instance is accessible to your clients, you're good to go.
So what about Azure and Ansible? Does Ansible have a bunch of Azure like plugins, and are there already modules, or what do we call them, for that allow me to do things in Azure? Because
yes, so if you go to Ansible's website for Azure, you can go to Ansible modules. You can type that in on Google. You'll be brought up to docs.ansible.com/Ansible and then Azure modules. Now, if you just go under strictly the cloud modules, you will see a bunch of Azure-based stuff. It's pretty much grouped alphabetically. So if you're looking at Azure, you go to the Azure-based section, and here you'll see all the different grouping of options that are pretty much out there, from VM creation to template creation, object removal, destruction. The best one probably out of the bunch is Azure ARM deployment, because it can literally create anything an ARM template can create.
So how does an ARM template compare to something like a CloudFormation template? Is it the same type of thing, or is Azure further along the line there?
Yeah, if you're familiar with CloudFormations, for those of you who don't know, CloudFormations is a JSON template format that Amazon Web Services created for spinning up their environments rather quickly. Not just, hey, I want a machine, but how do I spin up 50 machines in a complex situation? With that being said, the ARM templates are JSON based as well, and they do pretty much the exact same thing, but for Azure. And really everything that Azure does is based off of that format at this point.
Right on.
So that makes it real nice and easy. And that's the reason why I like that module for Azure in particular, because with Azure ARM deployment, anything you can put in an ARM template, you can control via Ansible with that deployment module. Now, the other tools might make it a little bit simpler, like if you want to do something like just a VM, but whenever you want to spin up complex deployments, that's really your go-to strategy for any situation.
So with an ARM template, I can spin up anything in Azure.
Yes.
Does ARM templates allow you to get even more in-depth? Like, can I wait for a service to come up before I do something else? Or is that something that maybe I would have to use Ansible to do?
You'd probably use Ansible to do something like that. Whenever you launch an ARM template, it goes from the get-go. So you can make things have priority. Like you can say, I'm going to create a virtual machine, and it requires a network adapter to be built with it, right? So you can have the network adapter be built first, and then the virtual machine be built second. That's totally doable. But if you're like, hey, I want the network's public IP address to be initialized so I can associate DNS properly with an ARM template, that's not really plausible. However, there are workarounds for things like that, using things like CNAMEs and public registries that are built into Azure. So,
right on.
There's always a way.
There's always a way.
Where were we? I don't even remember. Oh, okay, good. We finished snapshotting the box. We do have a VHD URL now. This is actually the URL, the snapshot of that machine we just captured. So if you're wondering, how could I go and actually view this inside of Azure? If you go into your portal, you can click on the storage account that's associated with your environment that you snapshotted into. In this case, it's CCSP. And after you go into here, you're going to see a series of options. Blobs is what we're looking at. And snapshots will always go under the system folder or system blob. So if you click on the system blob, you'll see Microsoft Compute, images, and then they're labeled based on whatever you wanted to use as the prefix. When you use the plugin that we, as in my team, has built in Python, it'll go under the captured folder. And there it is right in front of you. This template that's right next to it is a pre-built JSON template that comes with it. So if you wanted to just, hey, I want to spin up an instance of this, you could theoretically just use this template that came with it to do that. The templates that come out of the box, though, typically don't include network adapters and public IP addresses. So typically you want to familiarize yourself with ARM a little bit so you can build out your own templates that take care of that as well. So with that, if I want to spin up a box now that I've created this VHD, I can go to my next lab folder. I'll go to lab 6. And we're going to be looking at our ARM deployment. So in regards to this, first, we're going to look at our Azure ARM deployment YAML file. And we, again, for the purposes of this, we wanted to keep it real simple. So we just put the one task we're working on inside of our playbook. In this case, Azure ARM deployment, as I was saying before. The template link we're looking at is that JSON template that I just showed you guys a few minutes ago that we have inside of our GitHub account. You guys can leverage it all you want. We'll be leveraging it throughout our upcoming future roadshow as well. The things that it requires you to provide is a username for the box, a password for the box, a VM name, and then a VHD URL. So I'm going to give it a VM name. We'll just call it, how about hello1234 this time. And the VHD URL, I should have copied that before I went in here, is this guy. Okay, so we are going to fix that. And now, just as we did before, we're going to run Ansible playbook, Azure ARM deployment.yaml. And that should spin us up a copy of that box that's configured with all the things that we put it on previously. So it'll take probably, again, upwards of a minute or so. Anytime you're working with the destruction of a box or the creation of a box, you're going to have obviously a little bit of a time window that goes in there. For those of you who are curious, well, what if I want to move on to another task? I don't want to wait for this to complete. There's flags in Ansible that let you avoid waiting, just literally called wait. So wait : no will allow you to avoid having to wait for the task to complete. Obviously, if you do that and you want to configure the box, you're going to have to wait for it to come online so you can SSH into it properly. So be aware of that. Make design decisions based on what makes sense, obviously. Situations where you would want to remove the wait is like if I want to spin up 50 boxes at the same time. I'm not going to do that today, but if I obviously wanted to, that would be a real simple and easy way to control how to create boxes without having to wait for each individual one to come online. So, still no questions from the peanut gallery?
You are the peanut gallery, sir.
That's me. Dang.
Do you have any questions?
Do I have any questions?
Show me the Azure portal again. I really like the way that the Azure portal just kind of looks. The look and feel of the Azure portal is great. But I got icons and I've got stuff everywhere. So kind of walk me through how to navigate this.
Sure. One of the biggest things also that I appreciate about the Azure way of doing this is that they didn't try and reinvent the wheel when it comes up with the nomenclatures they use, right? Amazon's frequently known for coming up with their own unique use cases, Route 53, EC2, all these different things, and that can become really a burden for somebody who's trying to, migrate from what they typically consider normal to a new world. And Amazon has really, I think, put a little bit of a hard mark there. Azure has been really fluid and great to move when it comes to naming things and making everything feel very fluid and capable with their current platforms they have today. So what we're looking at now is if you want to use the platform, you log in and you're provided with this dashboard in front of you. And there's a number of things that are in front of you that you may want to use and may not want to use. The big heavy hitters obviously are going to be virtual machines, which is all the machines you have currently running. You can get a good status check on each one. In fact, there's our new virtual machine being created by Ansible right now. You can see the location which is being created, so in which data center does it currently reside, and you can control that obviously in the Ansible scripts, or you can control it upon selection of your creation. Another big heavy hitter is going to be your resource group section. And this is going to show you the overarching resource groups where your different machines are grouped. And that's a good way of not only grouping your resources from the standpoint of, logically making sense, but even from a quota perspective. You could lock a user down to a different resource group and say, hey, this resource group, they have access to everything in there, and they only have access to spin up this much stuff inside of that resource group. So it's really smooth and intuitive. The tile-based approach makes it really nice and easy to be able to kind of walk left to right throughout your environment. So I click on the CCSP resource group, and On my right-hand side, I'm immediately presented with all the resources that are a part of this resource group. I have my network interfaces, my public IP addresses, my virtual machines, my virtual networks. And if I ever want to click on any of these guys, it just keeps on moving to the right. So we just shift further to see, hey, what information can I get about this virtual machine, from IP information to the subscription information, the hard disks, backup, which is another great feature I think goes unnoticed in a lot of cloud providers, is how easy it is to back up a system in Azure. When you're dealing with most cloud providers, they typically want you to use outside resources for backup, or you just have to take snapshots of machines and kind of figure out your own backup strategy. Backing up in Azure is as simple as setting up a restart point in Windows. So you can just tell backup to start enabling backups and how often you want it to schedule your backup. Do you want it in a week? Do you want it by monthly, by daily? Whatever you want it by, it will start creating your backups in that window frame of time.
Doesn't it have some kind of like thing where it can take your backups and start them back up for you and see whether or not they're valid?
Yeah, so it can do checksums and ensure that your backups are completely usable. The cool thing is, because again it's like a restore point in Windows, it's so easy to switch right back to an old backup rather than having to reconfigure an old image that may or may not be working still.
And are those like full snapshots?
Yes.
Or okay, so they take up, if I've got a 22 gig machine,
Yeah.
is it going to take 22 gig worth
Yeah,
of
that's the
space?
one thing you do have to worry about a little bit, is that as you take more backups, you are going to use up more space. So be mindful of that, because you are charged, obviously.
So go back to the
for your
dashboard.
storage.
My favorite thing on the dashboard is the map.
Oh, the map.
The
Let me
map.
see if I can get back easily. There we go.
So the map's on your dashboard by default. This is my favorite thing.
And we can click on the country code you want. I clicked on East Asia. That was not my intention.
Do you have?
You wanted to go to just this
I want
one?
you to click on somewhere that we actually have stuff.
I know. I was trying to go to East US, but I accidentally clicked on East Asia.
That's no good.
Once it loads. No results. No. You
No,
looking at the wrong
we're
one?
actually in East US.
I don't know. Well, actually, before we move on, let me see where we're at. Oh, okay, so the machine did come up, and this is its new IP address. So before we
Right.
continue on, let's look at this box and see that it is up and running on port 3000. And it is, and if we're right about this, we should be able to go see Ansible, and it's still the best tool ever.
Still,
It's still the best tool ever. Doesn't change.
we should add Azure. It's the best.
I know, we should have the best
platform.
cloud platform ever. We got to do that.
Yeah.
We got to do that too. Yeah. So where were we? Oh, we were in the Azure portal. So yeah, we obviously have a lot of different features that are available here to us, and it's just such a nice experience, especially coming from a shop where I frequently use Microsoft-based tools and whatnot. It's very fluid in design and seems very similar. So if you're traditionally a Microsoft-based shop at all, this just fluidly makes sense. They have great PowerShell modules for managing all this. In fact, that's actually kind of the de facto way to manage all this, although obviously you can do it through Ansible or Python's SDK and whatnot.
The last thing you just launched had a bunch of variables in the template, didn't it?
It did. It did.
How do those work in Ansible?
So let's pull up. Yeah. So in Ansible, in this case, we didn't use variables, but in previous ones, we have set vars. Essentially, the way variables work in Ansible is you can decide where you want to set vars at any given time, and you can include them as well from anywhere. So Ansible by default will look for variables inside of your playbook, and then you can include extra directories like an other vars folder, or you can do something like group vars. Which the way group vars work is essentially if it recognizes a group inside of Azure that shares a common name, it will take that common name and apply the variables always to those machines. There's another one called all.yaml, which I can go back and show that as well. I think we have that in like lab 4 maybe? No, maybe it's lab 3 I'm thinking of. Actually, I'll do this. Make my life easier. Okay, we only have, it looks like other vars inside of these labs, but I can pop up something that I have in my own box to show.
So what I'm concerned about is like, where am I pulling these variables from? Flat files, environment variables.
Right.
Right.
So, and we are going to get to that, obviously, but you are exactly right. So there's currently, when you're using Ansible, typically it's going to look inside of either the playbook itself or some file that it's referencing. In this case, we have, Ansible key.yaml, Isinga Azure. We have all these different files that I have that are getting referenced for variables. And then, as I said, you can reference them by a grouping mechanism. And those grouping mechanisms are defined by your dynamic inventory or your regular inventory, however you want it. But this stuff is hard-coded. So, I mean, if you're trying to look at something that's in here, you're going to obviously see stuff that shouldn't be listed in a hard-coded file that is shared, like we talked about before. So this is where it comes into the point of, like, how do I use Conjur, or something similar to Conjur at least, to control access to it? And Conjur is the first tool I've actually seen that's successfully been able to do this and do this easily. So essentially what ends up happening is you log into the Conjur portal, and you can either go through the portal or go through the command line to do this, but you create a secrets entry, and you grant access to host machines to be able to view said secret. Now, in this case, we're going to look at our SSH key, because let's just say theoretically, we'd want this SSH key to be something more secure than just leaving it on the box. So let's go back to lab 2. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to start shutting down that first instance if I can. Let me do this.
You don't have an Ansible script to shut it down?
I do, actually. I forgot about that.
That's what I thought.
I do have a box that'll shut this down. Let's do this. We're looking at other vares, and we're going to rename this to Hello World 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to run this in the background. Okay, so that should take care of killing that box off. And in the meantime, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go to our lab 3 directory. And we see in here, this is our SSH key. I want to remove this out of here. So I'm going to copy this first. I will make sure I undo that. And we're going to put this key content inside of our Conjur portal. So let's update this key. Oh, my bad. Okay. So that's our SSH key now being populated in Conjur. It's listed under the variable SSH key. So I've already gone to the liberty on our Conjur box of making that variable accessible to this machine. In the labs, we'll walk you through exactly how that works. I should actually just delete all this. Let me just do it that way.
So Conjur has this concept of each machine having like a host identity or something. Is that how it tracks how it accesses?
Yeah, so every machine inside your environment, and you can also logically group multiple machines together and whatnot. But yeah, you give a key out, an API key for each given machine inside your environment. And once that API key has been given to that machine has access to whatever content inside of Conjur you provided access for. And it could even be just as simple as it only has the ability to read this key. It can't make changes to it. So it makes it really nice and convenient, and they have a great tool that generates all the configuration requirements for logging into your Conjur instance via summons. So that makes it really nice and easy. So what we're going to do, though, is we're going to use summon to put that SSH key into the environment variable just for this process. In order to get it accessible in Ansible, though, I need to add a lookup for that environment variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do bracket bracket lookup env for environment. That's making it look in the environment variables. And then we're going to look at SSH key, because that's what I'm going to call the environment variable as well. And then we're going to double close it with brackets. Okay. It appears that that VM got finished removing. Let's just double check in the meantime. that box is gone. Looks like I kept the IP address and stuff, which is my bad, but I will fix that later. Okay, so what we're going to do now that we've done that, is with every summons instance, you need to make what's called a secrets.yaml file, and you can put that locally in your directory. You can put it somewhere else. Your secrets.yaml file essentially tells summon what secrets to gather and where to put it. So in this case, we're going to take the variable SSH key. Hang on a second.
And Summon is an open source project, right? The Conjur is created.
Yeah, they created a project called Summon, which essentially is a command line tool for being able to pull secrets from different providers. And the main provider, obviously, they use is Conjur itself, but you can use other providers as well. Things like EC2 storage accounts and stuff like that. You can store secrets inside of, but in different ways. So it comes prepackaged though with the one for Conjur. What we're going to do is we're going to look up the variable SSH key inside of Conjur itself, and we're going to stuff it inside our environment variable SSH key. And to see what this looks like, I'm going to run env. Clearly, we don't see the SSH password here, so what I'm going to do again is summon env. And you'll see now that SSH key variable exists, and there's the SSH key itself. That's great. So now if I want to be able to stuff this inside of Ansible, I can do summon Ansible playbook. And before I even do this, just to validate again with you guys, and I'll change this again so we have a different machine in here at 4.5 at the end. You can see though that we're going to look up that environment variable for the SSH key when we go to create this box. So we're going to do summon Ansible playbook, and then Azure create YAML. So essentially the way summon works is any process you attach at the end of the summon command gets the environment variables injected from the current existing path, as well as what someone can provide from whatever provider it's using, in this case Conjur. So this is going to be able to pull that SSH key down from Azure and then fill it in for us inside of from Azure, from Conjur, and then fill it into our Ansible playbook. Right? Yeah, which is in Azure technically. Right?
Technically, that's correct.
Technically correct. So that makes it nice and easy for us to be able to use it and leverage it. And the cool thing is that means you can safely upload your secrets YAML file to your Git repository. You don't have to worry about putting the key in there. And so your key can be stored in an encrypted file system on a remote subsystem that we can guarantee some level of security around. So that makes it really easy and convenient. That's going to take, obviously, a few minutes to build. So we will leave that going for now.
Do we have any more questions?
Mainly about what the summon tool was. We got that handled.
Okay. What's the summon tool? Yes, and for those of you who are interested, you can go to their GitHub where they have it posted.
I posted it in chat.
Oh, you posted it in chat? Well, I'm still going to do it for all viewers.
For everybody who's not in
For everybody who's not in chat right now. Yeah, so you can go to github.com conjurinc/summon. This is where their source code is for it. It's written in Go. They have a cool downloadable package that you can use. I believe the releases are on here too. Yep, they are. So you can just go to releases and then pull down the version of it for your box in particular, which is great. And then you can go back and look at all the different providers that they have that are available as well. As I said, they have one that's pre-built, obviously, for Conjur. They have some others that are out there as well. And just like I said, also, you can pre-plug in Summon to things like other configuration management tools. But Ansible makes it really easy by just saying, hey, we can stuff environment variables in there, and Summon fills it in for us. So, let's see where we're at. Still building the box, because that's what happens in these situations. But I think it's pretty obvious at this point that the SSH key is in there, but just for argument's sake, I will let it load. I think at this point, we want to thank everybody for watching our live stream so far. Thank you for attending this session, and hopefully we'll get to see a lot of you guys on March 23rd here physically in person to do a more in-depth version of these labs, as well as to get access to our presentation material.
Yeah, I mean, thank everybody for bearing with us.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially
We're not kidding when we say that this is the first time we've done a live stream.
I
Just
hope
want everybody to see this.
Yeah. It is taped.
It is taped.
It's taped.
the mic stand
Literally.
really is.
Yes. We also want to thank Nash DevOps. Thank you guys so much for all the hard work you guys have been doing down there. Thank you for, coming to watch us and having us have the opportunity to actually talk to you guys virtually through this live chat. I hope this was helpful. We really hope this, is something you guys will like to see more of, and that in the future we'll be able to live stream other things to you guys besides this. Please, 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 we want to make this a better experience. Any comments, concerns, any changes you guys think that we should make to this in regards to polishing or ideas you have, send them our way. We literally put this together in about a week. So I think we did pretty good, all things considered, but we want to make this as polished as humanly possible to give you guys the best experience possible. So leave us marks in the chat, send emails to us, tweet at us at Shadowsoft News. Let us know everything that you guys have in regards to opinions, questions, comments, either about the content or about the delivery mechanism. With that, the last lab looks like it's completed. Let's double check to make sure we can get onto that box real quick. Where did my mouse go? There it is. So I'll go back to Azure. Let's pull that IP address. And let's double check that we can SSH into there as expected. And we can. That's it. So honestly, that's yeah. So honestly, that's as easy as it is to use summon with any tool. So you can really easily.
Can you just run summon from the command line?
What do you
say summon and grab a variable?
There is a way
from
to
the command line. How do I say what is the value of said variable?
It might be
Can you use Conjur command for that, or is
there is a summon command I think that does that as well. I'm very new to this, so let's see if I can figure it out. It might be a pure Conjur command. You might not be able to just do that. I mean, the easiest way to do that, honestly, is just to do summon env, and then you can see what comes back.
Oh, right, because you're running the env command, so you
right, so it pumps back, whatever's in there. So that's an easy way of obviously doing it. So, yeah. So, if you guys don't have any more questions. Do you? Yes, maybe, no?
Not right this second. I will hang out for just a little bit longer if we have any questions that come in. Again, check out the Nash DevOps meetup website, meetup.com. Hit up Nash DevOps. You can see the new meetups that are coming along. Make comments. If you have an idea for a meetup, send it our way.
Please do. All right, I think that's it. Well, thank you guys for attending. We really appreciate it again. Remember, March 23rd, sign up, go to our website, make it happen, because we want to keep creating events like this for you guys so you can be informed and learn more about this type of stuff. And obviously, food and beer is always good, so why not?
Why not?
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks.